Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. The JAMODI podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products. You've had the opportunity to play for several coaches and at a high level, but then also coach for, and you talked about Coach Bell, competing against him that 1 year at Fort Worth Christian. The style of play that he did bring in, it's very different from what I know you two like or teach. So with all those experiences, what is your favorite style of basketball to teach?
You know, my favorite style offensively has got to be a dribble drive, and really emphasizing pace and space. I don't think I know, watching your teams run dribble drive, watching your teams just have the flow and the freedom to express themselves, was something where I was like, man, I need to find a way to kind of make that my own, if that makes sense. You know, I think when we take some of the thought process away from our kids of like, well, no, I have to make this pass, or I'm waiting on that specific screen, or I have to wait on that cut to do this. You know, talent can overcome some of those things, but I think we're really putting them in a box, and we're not preparing them to be the most creative self that they can be on the floor. And one thing going from Fort Worth Christian to Grace Prep was getting out of my comfort zone a little bit as a coach, and kind of letting pace and space, and then letting our kids be themselves and watching them do what they do, and then go, okay, how can I kind of put not some reins on it, but how do I kind of make this my own, and how do I put some rules to this, that way there's a thought process behind it, and we're not just like, we're just kind of fast breaking kind of you watched us play the last 2 years. There's a lot of fast break, but when we're in the half court, I don't want it to be, all right, well, now we're in the half court, bring the ball up, all right, we're in flex, here we go, and it's, methodical, and we're going to take 45 seconds or a minute. I'm like, man, we need space, and we need the ball handler to be creative. And I think one thing that we did the last 2 years, you talked about Jeff Bell. He ran that circle motion, and it was really, really good for the kids that we had. It put them in a system where they felt confident. Yeah. And it put them in a system where they were like, we're not really used to success or really having like a purpose when we go out there, and that gave them that purpose, right? Well, I make the move. I'm a head coach, and we start kind of running that same system, but it's not really mine, and I kind of wrestle with it. One thing that we did last year is we actually ran a little bit of circle motion, but we moved it to 5 out. A 5 out circle motion. And honestly, I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that we actually scored using the concept of circle motion. All it was pace and space. Yeah. All we want is our kids to move. And then looking at in a dribble drive, right? Looking at how the defense closes out, looking at how the defense is helping, looking at how the defense is recovering. Are they recovering high side, low side? What angles do I attack? All of those things were ingrained in our kids. And so all it was this false motion just to get us moving. And as soon as the ball hit a kid, which was honestly all 5 of our kids on the floor really at any given time, had the license to dribble, drive, kick, make a layup. I mean, it really was. I mean, it was at the rim and open threes in that dribble, drive, pace, and space. And so I really like teaching getting out fast. We always want to dictate what the defense does, right? A good defense is going to dictate what you do, and it doesn't matter what you run. We want to get down there and create mismatches so fast the defense is on their heels, and they're like, well, I had to close out late, and then we we got the paint touch, and we got an open three and kicked it out. So, we run a couple of different sets and motions, but a lot of them are honestly false motions. They are just to get our kids moving, getting them in our 5 spots that we really like, and then trying to get as many paint touches as possible and letting our players dictate what happens after that.
Yeah, against bad defenses, you don't need much ball movement or player movement if you have good spacing.
Right.
Because the gaps are there that you can attack. But against good defenses, good coaches, good teams, false motion, like you said, but ball movement, player movement to get the right player in the right gap and an opportunity to attack. That's really smart. I want to celebrate you, Justin. Again, getting to see you as an assistant coach, take over that Fourth Christian program, and then now what you've done at Grace Prep. It has been a lot of fun to even listen to you and text back and forth with you about how your teams are looking, the way that you want them to play, the way that you've embraced the three ball. Because I think so many of us are just, we want, like you said, we want to play in race and space, but as a coach, actually allowing it to happen, it's way harder than I think like many coaches believe.
I think so too, and it's one of those things that's a process. I can remember, kind of early on, especially my first year at Grace Prep, we didn't have a ton of seniors. We were mostly junior heavy, and a lot of them, some of them had played varsity as a sophomore. Some were on the JV. They weren't connected like they were in junior high, so it was kind of that year of getting the band back together, if you will, and we learned how to play with each other. And the first, month and a half, on top of it being the height of COVID, it was one of those things where it was like, just keep trusting it. Just keep trusting it. We've got the players. They know the system, but we have to keep trusting it. Even when we were shooting, 25, 28, 29% for a game. And it's like, okay, do we really need to be looking at getting more, looks at the rim? But then I just kind of was like, man, like, I don't know why we would say we're going to cut off one whole aspect of our offense to emphasize another. I'm like, you got to empower your players to do that, right? I mean, like, of course, you're gonna, come over and be like, hey, was that, you had a wide open layup? Why are we kicking the three? Like, that's a very normal conversation, even in space offense. Like, I'll just take the 2 points, thank you. Why are we making it any harder? But at the same time, I'm like, I want my players to come over and be like, I should have just taken the layup. Like, why would I, like, they have to have ownership of that kind of stuff. And so that first year was a lot of getting to learn of like, okay, that's a good shot. That's maybe what we want in this situation. Maybe this is what we want in another situation. And then I felt like this year it was much more of like them going out and being like, in a respectful way, like, coach, we got you. Like, we know. Because of the over communication, we communicated this is what we want offensively, and on top of that, they had played so long together. It's like, and that's the dude we want to do it.
Yeah,
everybody was like, "You're right, that is the dude we want to do it." So and I know you don't talk a whole lot of defense on this podcast, but
a little waste of time. No,
waste of time.
No, I do like some good pressure, and I like defenses that will also lead to running and gunning. So yeah,
siding the ball, all ball pressure, shooting gaps. I mean, we generated so much, as anybody does. You just generate so much offense when you're the defense is dictating what the offense can do, not just on your heels going, we'll just keep helping, we'll just keep helping, we'll just keep helping, and then hopefully they miss a shot. I'm like, I want to force a missed shot or force a turnover, not just hope for one.
Yeah, I think what's really special is when you see athletes like you had, but that also had skill, but were also organized, which comes from coaching, then you get something really special. Coming off of the year that you had and the success you've had really the last 2 years, younger group this season, how are you helping them? Like not necessarily just replicate what you've done before, because new teams that maybe they find things out differently, or even have ultimately some different choices that you have to make for them. But how are you helping them with maybe expectations of what they just seen?
Yeah, one of the things I think in our first day, like the first day of school, we don't go out on the floor. We're in the locker room, kind of. I'm passing out our expectations. We introduce everybody, all of those kind of housekeeping things. And one of the things that I wanted to let them know was that this is a different group, and that's okay. And also, us as coaches, the comparison game is a thief of joy. I mean, you just can't. And I committed to them. I said, look, I'm gonna in this talk, I'm gonna talk about some of the things that I think our guys did the last 2 years that made them very successful as individual players, but then also allowed for us to have some pretty good team success. And I'm going to talk about that and maybe some by name. And I said, after this meeting, if I ever do that again, if I ever say like, God, just last year's team wouldn't have done this or that, I said, you need to hold me accountable. Like I need to hear it because that's not fair for you and it's not fair for me. I'm not coaching the same group and you guys aren't the same group. And we have strengths that we have this year that we didn't have last year, but we also have weaknesses this year that we didn't have last year. It's a totally new group. And so I wanted them to hear that from me, that like I was never going to sit there and be like, oh, well, we only won by 10 tonight. Last year we would have won by, you can't do that. That is totally defeating to a team that's like, well, they're kind of gone. Like, I don't know, like it doesn't matter anymore. And so I think I think it's hard because as humans, we want to do that. It's kind of like you look on Max Preps and you're like, oh, we beat them by this and they lost it. You can't do that.
Correct? Dangerous game.
Yeah, it's a dangerous game. You can't do it. And so, I'm sure it's going to be a work in progress. And I'm sure that some of those things too, of what I'm saying of like, I don't want to compare them. They also can't compare themselves. And that's something that I can't necessarily control inside of their mind, but I can create a culture where we don't do that.
Yeah. I think that takes a lot of control because when you, especially for as a coach, when you're thinking back to how smooth something was last season, all the success you had, I think it's dangerous to continue over and over again to bring up the past, to set unrealistic expectations for your current team. Chris Hill at Jesuit had a good point that every year he starts fresh, obviously taking some of the good things, but starts fresh with the group that he has and helping them to become what, to reach their potential. But then at the same time too, the standards that you've set, what your program is about or the culture of it, that can carry over from year to year.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we have a sign. We just have one sign in our locker room. It's right above the door. And it just says the GP Grace Prep, the GP way. And what we had talked about last year was it doesn't matter who we play. It doesn't matter what day it is. It doesn't matter what month it is. We're going to play our way. The opponent should never change based on who we're playing. And then we also would talk about practices. Like we're going to practice the GP way, right? And a couple of those things that we had put in there, and it's something that I really wanted to make sure that our guys understood, because the word I'm about to say it can be used in a negative connotation. So I didn't just say it and say, figure it out for yourself. We kind of put some rules around like, what do I mean by this? And one of them was pride. And it wasn't a foolish pride. It wasn't a pride in oneself. It wasn't a pride and we're just going to roll the ball out and kind of do whatever we want. But it was something where I was like, man, Grace Prep means so much to me, right? Like I'm proud of it. And when we go on the floor, we should act proud of our program and what we do on a daily basis to set us up for success. The other two words on there were communication and trust. Those three, I mean, it boils down to those things. And every program can highlight different things and they're all good. But I just kind of had settled on that. Is like, that's the Grace Prep way right there. And it was so pointed. And assistants would bring that up in practice. Like, are we practicing the Grace Prep way? And kids,
Yeah.
It was something where it was common language. And that, like you said, that doesn't change. The players change, the style could change, the opponents can change, all those things can change. But the program and what we're about, it doesn't matter if it's Johnny or Jimmy or whoever it is running out there, we're going to play the Grace Prep way.
Yeah. I think it'd be really cool for when you have your former players come back. Obviously, maybe some style is different depending on the team that you have.
Right.
And maybe some concepts that you have this group running. But for a former player to look and maybe we ask them, does it still look the same? Does it still feel the same?
Yep.
Are we, and what we mean by that is the way that we are on the bench, how we are as teammates, the way that we communicate, the joy that we play with. Or, what if they come back and they say, you know what, just look just a little too serious. Like you guys are taking yourselves too seriously. I think that would be a really cool, I don't know, marker to find out for yourself in your program of, have we deviated culture wise far from what we've been in the past.
Really good.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.